إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلن تجد له وليا مرشدا. All praise is due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We praise Him and we seek His assistance and we seek His forgiveness and we seek assistance in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from the evil of our own souls and our evil actions. Whomsoever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guides, no one can misguide, and whomsoever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala leads astray, no one can guide. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. And I bear witness and testify that there is no deity worthy of worship except for Allah, and that Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam is His prophet and messenger. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد الفاتح لما أغلق والخاتم لما سبق ناصر الحق بالحق والهادي إلى صراطك المستقيم وعلى آله حق قدره ومقداره العظيم. أما بعد أوصي نفسي وإياكم بتقوى الله تعالى. Brothers and sisters, I remind myself and all of you to fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in the Quran after أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. O you who have believed, fear Allah as He is meant to be feared, and do not die except in a state of submission to Him. And He says, يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله ولتنظر نفس ما قدمت لغد واتقوا الله إن الله خبير بما تعملون. O you who have believed, fear Allah and let each person see what he has put forth for tomorrow. Let each person see what he has put forth for the day of judgment. And fear Allah. Indeed, Allah is all-knowing of what you do. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. O you who have believed, fear Allah and say what is upright. He will guide you to righteous actions and forgive you of your shortcomings. And whomsoever obeys Allah and His Messenger, for indeed he has achieved a great triumph. And whomsoever obeys Allah and His Messenger, for indeed he was successful. Brothers and sisters, we thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the bounty of guidance in Islam. We thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the blessing of laws and prohibitions. Again, we thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the blessings, for the blessing of laws and regulation, for halal and haram, for boundaries, for a systematic way to run your life, for submission. We thank Allah for boundaries. We thank Allah for halal and haram. We thank Allah for commandments. We thank Allah for the book of the Quran, the revelation, the guidance to mankind. We thank Allah for the Quran and what it came with. And we thank Allah for the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and what he came with. It is incumbent upon every Muslim to love the Prophet more than he loves his own self. You have to love the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam more than you love your own self. How could you do that? You have to understand who the Prophet was. You have to read his seerah and get to know him intimately. Because you can't love someone if you don't know them intimately. You can't cultivate love for something if you don't know it intimately. Love is a strong emotion. You have to love the Prophet more than your own self, because he came with guidance and light, and the Quran was revealed to him. And without the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we'd be in utter misery. We'd be in utter misery and sadness and sorrow and darkness. He came with light. He came with the light of guidance in the Quran and the Sunnah. Now, with that being said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He commands us with certain commandments in the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the master and creator of the heavens and the universe, the king of kings, He commands us with certain commandments in the Quran. And everything Allah commands us to do, everything Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands us to do is for our own benefit. إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَأْمُرُ بِالْفَحْشَاءِ أَتَقُولُونَ عَلَى اللَّهِ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Allah does not command with badness and indecency. Do you say upon Allah what you should not say? Do you talk upon Allah without knowledge? You know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He only commands with goodness. Allah only commands with goodness, and He commands with protecting society. Every commandment in Islam comes with an underlying reason and goal behind it. Every commandment that Allah gives us, there's a goal behind it. Protection of deen, protection of life, protection of family, protection of dignity, protection of money. Yeah, there's goals in the Sharia. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in Surah An-Nur, one of the most beautiful chapters of the Quran. One of the most beautiful chapters of the Quran, the chapter of light. It's called the Surah of Nur because the famous ayah of Allah's light is in it. Allahu nuru samawati wal ard. Mathalu nurihi kamishkatin fiha misbah. Al-misbahu fi الزجاجة etc., etc., to the end of the ayah. Allah is the light of the heavens and the universe, and His light is like that of a fire in a lamp, the niche in the lamp. And Allah goes and He gives a parable about His beautiful light. But interestingly, the Surah Nur is a surah of laws and regulations, mostly pertaining to gender relations. Interestingly, subhanAllah. And Allah mentions His light in there. What does Allah say in Surah Nur that we want to highlight today and talk about? Allah, He says a powerful ayah, a scary ayah. And wallahi, the Quran is perfect, and the command of Allah are all perfect. And we're thankful to Allah for boundaries, because if it wasn't for boundaries of Sharia, it would be utter chaos, and we'd live life like we're in a zoo, like we're baha'im, like we're animals. Laws and regulations are what make you structured. If there was no traffic signals on 434, no one would know when to pass the Ronald Reagan or not pass Ronald Reagan. It will be an accident every day. But the red light and the green light and the yellow light, they come to grant you freedom, not enslavement. It's freedom. Following law is freedom. That's what gives us, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He sends down law and commandment. It's actual freedom. It's the essence of freedom. Because you're not a slave to your desire. What does Allah say in Surah An-Nur? What's the highlight? He says, قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِاللَّهِ مِنَ الشَّيْطَانِ الرَّجِيمِ قُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ يَغُضُّوا مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِمْ وَيَحْفَظُوا فُرُوجَهُمْ ذَلِكَ أَزْكَى لَهُمْ إِنَّ اللَّهَ خَبِيرٌ بِمَا يَصْنَعُونَ. Wallahi, it's a beautiful ayah. Allah, He says, قُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ, tell the believing men, يَغُضُّوا مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِمْ, to lower their gaze, and وَيَحْفَظُوا فُرُوجَهُمْ, and to guard their chastity, and to guard their private parts. ذَلِكَ أَزْكَى لَهُمْ, that is more befitting to them, that is more pure to them, that is more tasteful to them. إِنَّ اللَّهَ خَبِيرٌ بِمَا يَصْنَعُونَ, indeed Allah is all aware of what they manufacture. Indeed, Allah is all aware of what they manufacture. He doesn't say of what they do. He doesn't say, إِنَّ اللَّهَ خَبِيرٌ بِمَا يَعْمَلُونَ, or بِمَا يَنْظُرُونَ, or بِمَا يَسْمَعُونَ. He doesn't say Allah is all aware of what they hear or what they saw. He says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ خَبِيرٌ بِمَا يَصْنَعُونَ. It's so interesting, wallahi. The Quran is amazing. The word choice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is meticulous and perfect always. Usually Allah ends the ayahs of fearing Allah and being aware of Him with, He's aware of what you do. He's aware of what you see. But He says, no, Allah is all aware of what you manufacture, what you play in your head, the script you have in your head, the fake script. What does this all mean? First of all, tell the believing men to lower their gaze and to guard their chastity, their private parts. ذَلِكَ أَزْكَى لَهُمْ, that's more pure to them. Indeed, Allah is all knowing of what you manufacture. This is a command from the King of Kings to every single man, every believing man, لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ, a believing man, to lower his gaze. We say, why do we lower our gaze? What's the point of lowering our gaze? First and foremost, to understand something very simple. In Islam, when Allah commands you to do something, that's why you do it, because Allah has commanded you to do it. It's called submission. It's called Muslim. You are a Muslim. Aslama yuslimu. Islam is to submit. So first and foremost, why do we lower our gaze? Because Allah told us to lower our gaze in the Quran. That's the first most important thing we understand. Why do we fast Ramadan? Because Allah commanded us to fast Ramadan in the Quran. Why do we pray Salah? Because Allah commanded us to pray Salah in the Quran. Why do we give zakah? Because Allah commanded us to give zakah in the Quran. You do something because it's an obligation by Allah. That's why we do it. So why do we lower our gaze? Because it's an obligation from Allah in the Quran. That's why we do it. Now, what is the reason behind this obligation? Why does Allah tell us to lower the gaze? Because Allah is all wise. He's Hakimun Alim. He's the all wise and all knowing. Allah knows everything, and Allah comes to protect us, and Allah comes to protect society, and Allah comes to protect your family. When these boundaries are set up, it's all for protection of yourself or your family or your dignity. Why do we lower our gaze? Because the gaze is the first stepping stone to zina. The gaze is the first stepping stone to fornication and haram, in misery, in darkness. The gaze is the first thing that the shaitan uses to play with your head. إِنَّ الشَّيْطَانَ لَكُمْ عَدُوٌّ فَاتَّخِذُوهُ عَدُوًّا إِنَّمَا يَدْعُو حِزْبَهُ لِيَكُونُوا مِنْ أَصْحَابِ السَّعِيرِ. Allah, He says in Surah Al-Fatir, indeed the shaitan is a known enemy to you. So take him as an enemy. Allah, He's commanding you to take the shaitan as an enemy. إِنَّ الشَّيْطَانَ لَكُمْ عَدُوًّا. Shaitan is your enemy, so take him as an enemy. إِنَّمَا يَدْعُو حِزْبَهُ لِيَكُونُوا مِنْ أَصْحَابِ السَّعِيرِ. Indeed, he calls out his followers, his hizb, his people, his party, to be from the inhabitants of the fire. The shaitan calls out to his party to be the fuel of the fire. When you follow shaitan, it equals fire. When you follow shaitan, it equals nar. When you follow Allah, it equals Jannah and bliss and heaven and goodness and light. When you follow shaitan, it equals darkness and misery, darkness in your face and darkness on your heart, and darkness on the day of judgment, and scariness in the grave, and darkness in the grave. When you follow Allah and His Messenger, it's light in the grave. It's light on the day of judgment. It's light in this world. It's light in the darkness of this world. It's light everywhere. Upholding the commands of Allah is nothing but good and light. And following the shaitan is nothing but darkness and misery. It's nothing but darkness and misery.
is nothing but darkness and misery. The shaitan wants you to stare and to look at what you should not look at, because the shaitan wants to commit mischief in the land. He wants you to go and not be pleased with what you have at home. He wants you to not be pleased with the halal that you have. The mu'min is content and pleased with what he has at home. The mu'min is happy to uphold the command of Allah. The mu'min finds pleasure in his heart when he doesn't look at haram. He finds a sweetness and a light and a tingling sensation in his heart when he looks down and he doesn't look up at something he should not look at. And that's because his heart is cultivated with faith. His heart has been cultivated with iman and love for Allah. Your heart has to be cultivated with iman and love for Allah. That's what's going to make you not look. And you have to understand correlations. You have to understand nata'ij. You have to understand conclusions. You have to understand that when you look, you get darkness here and you get misery here, and you go home and you fight with your wife. You have to connect dots. You have to connect dots. The barakah is stripped from your marriage when you look at haram. The barakah is stripped. The taste becomes distasteful. Your wife becomes distasteful to you. That's why we say this ayah is scary. Wallahi, the adjective usage of Allah is impeccable, meticulous. Allah, He says, ذَلِكَ أَزْكَى لَهُمْ. Lowering your gaze and guarding your chastity and guarding your private parts, Allah, He describes it as أَزْكَى لَهُمْ. Azka can mean pure and it can mean tasteful. When you eat something, you say, هذا أكل زاكي شهي. You say, this is أكل زاكي. You say, it's tasteful food. Your wife will always be tasteful to you in a good way as long as you don't look at haram and you're pure and you're lowering your gaze. And your wife will not have no taste for you. You will have no taste with your wife. Yani you won't enjoy your wife if you're looking at haram, if your eye is wandering in the gym. If your eye is wandering and you're not lowering your gaze, you will lose the barakah in your marriage. You're going to go home and going to have a fight with your wife. You can say, I don't know why every day I'm fighting with my wife, because you're not lowering your gaze. You're wandering. You're wandering. The gaze is the first thing that takes you to zina. It's footsteps. The shaitan doesn't come and say commit zina, brother. The shaitan doesn't come and say go fornicate. The shaitan doesn't come and say commit murder. The shaitan doesn't come and tell you to commit murder. He takes you through footsteps. Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu la tattabi'u khutuwat ash-shaytan. Allah, He says four separate times in the Quran. He says four separate times in the Quran a similar verse. Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu, O you who have believed, do not follow the footsteps of the shaitan. Do not follow the footsteps of the shaitan. And the one that I want to talk about today is the one in Surah An-Nur. It comes in Surah An-Nur as well. Allah subhanahu says, وَمَنْ يَتَّبِعْ خُطُوَاتِ الشَّيْطَانِ فإنه يأمر بالفحشاء والمنكر ولولا فضل الله عليكم ورحمته ما زكى منكم من أحد أبدا ولكن الله يزكي من يشاء والله سميع عليم. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. O you who have believed, do not follow the footsteps of the shaitan, for indeed whomsoever follows the footsteps of shaitan, فإنه يأمر بالفحشاء والمنكر. For indeed shaitan commands with indecency and wrongdoing and darkness. For indeed the shaitan commands with fahsha and munkar. Fahsha is dirtiness in terms of lewd acts, and munkar, doing haram. And then he says, وَلَوْلَا فَضْلُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكُمْ وَرَحْمَتُهُ مَا زَكَى مِنكُم مِّنْ أَحَدٍ أَبَدًا وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ يُزَكِّي مَن يَشَاءُ. Allah reminds you of your bounty. Allah reminds you of the goodness that you have in this dunya. It's from Allah only, from Allah, from Quran and from guidance and iman and Islam. Allah, He goes, وَلَوْلَا فَضْلُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكُمْ. And if it was not for the bounty of Allah upon you, and if it was not from the grace and bounty of the King of Kings upon you with Quran and Islam and light and guidance and the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, مَا زَكَى مِنكُم مِّنْ أَحَدٍ. None of you would have been pure. None of you would have had chastity. وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ يُزَكِّي مَن يَشَاءُ. However, indeed, Allah, He grants purity and chastity and light and goodness to whomever He wills to grant it to. He grants goodness and light and chastity to whoever He wants to grant it to. Wallahu Sami'un Alim. And Allah is all hearing and all aware. Allah hears everything and Allah is all aware. Allah hears everything and Allah is all aware. We go back to this ayah. Don't follow the footsteps of shaitan. What is following the footsteps of shaitan? The first footstep of zina is the basar. The first footstep of zina is the look. When you cut off the first footstep, you don't end up committing the seventh footstep of zina. When you cut off the first thing, that's why Allah, He commands you to cut off the first thing. He says, غُضُّوا مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِمْ. Lower your gaze. The gaze, the eye is the first thing that's going to lead you to the next step. And the next step is, how are you doing? Chatting with someone, yeah? It's just, we say it's work talk. It's work banter. It's work banter. There's no such thing as banter between a haram man and a haram woman on each other. If the woman is eligible for you to marry, if the woman is not haram on you, meaning she's not your sister, she's not your mother, right? She's not your daughter. If the woman is not haram on you, there's no such thing as work banter. There's no such thing as work banter. We're not saying you be an alien and you live in a cave. We're not saying that. No, Islam is realistic. We're not saying we're mean to everyone. That's not what we're saying, no. So no one misunderstands or misinterprets. But Allah comes with boundaries and regulations and laws for a reason. And like we were saying in the beginning of the khutbah, if you think that the law of Allah is outdated, yeah, because no, it's just America, it's 2023, it's work banter. Like, what am I going to do at work? You could speak to anybody, any female colleague at work with boundaries, you know. You could be a man and talk with boundaries. You don't have to look at her and stare at her, yeah, and then joke and laugh and eye emoji and heart emoji and everything emoji. يا نساء النبي لستن كأحد من النساء إن اتقيتن فلا تخضعن بالقول فيطمع الذي في قلبه مرض وقلن قولا معروفا. Amazing. Oh, wives of the Prophet, لستن كأحد من النساء إن اتقيتن فلا تخضعن بالقول فيطمع الذي في قلبه مرض. Oh, wives of the Prophet, you're not like any other woman on the face of the earth. So fear Allah and be pious. And talk roughly, don't talk softly. فَيَطَمَعَ الَّذِي فِي قَلْبِهِ مَرَض. So perhaps that the one that has a diseased heart will get طمع, he'll get excited. وَقُلْنَا قَوْلًا مَعْرُوفًا. And say an upright straight word. This command comes down to the wives of the Prophet, but of course it's universal for all women, for all Muslim women. Yeah, this command is universal for all Muslim women. Allah, He commands the Muslim woman in the Quran with something very interesting. He says, say an upright word and don't talk softly. فَيَطْمَعَ الَّذِي فِي قَلْبِهِ مَرَض. Because when you speak softly to a man, he's going to get excited. He's on third base already, and she's not meaning anything. She's speaking nicely because she works with him, and he's already on third base thinking of what's going to happen next week. That's why Allah says, وَاللَّهُ خَبِيرٌ بِمَا يَصْنَعُونَ. That's why Allah, He ends the first ayah of غَضَّ الْبَصَرِ with Allah is all knowing of what you manufacture. Allah is all aware of what you manufacture, not of what you see, because you're manufacturing situations in your head that are far from reality. Yeah, because you're manufacturing, you're creating something in your head that's not true. Just from the way a woman is speaking to you. The woman, they follow the command of Allah. The woman should follow the command of Allah and not speak softly to a non-mahram man. And the man should not speak with no purpose to a non-mahram woman. If there's something called boundaries, you stick to boundaries. Yeah, you stick to professionalism. I'm not telling you not to speak to a woman at work. We all work. No, you speak to a woman at work, but you have boundaries and professionalism. And that's how you save your marriage at home. That's how you save blessings in the house. And then don't be shady. And don't be secretive. The person that has nothing to hide and he fears Allah, he's not secretive and shady. His phone is out on the counter and he doesn't fear his phone being out on the counter. He goes and he drinks water and he has a good day because he's clear with Allah and his conscience is real. And his conscience with Allah is pure. If your conscience is straight with Allah, you have nothing to hide, man. You have nothing to hide. If your conscience is not pure with Allah and you have something to hide, then you're going to get scared of your phone. You're going to get nervous. You have to take your phone with you to the bathroom. You have to take your phone to you when you sleep. You put it under your pillow. What kind of marriage is this? What kind of marriage is this? This is a marriage recipe for disaster. This is a recipe for disaster. Intimacy is supposed to be between you and your spouse. It's halal. Islam comes with realistic outings. Yeah, we say that I have a problem. I can't. Shahwa is a problem. My desires are overcoming me, and my ghad al-basar is difficult. So we take the Prophet ﷺ's prescription. We take the prescription of the Prophet ﷺ, the one who la yantaqu an al-hawa, the one who doesn't speak from desire. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, "Man istata'a minkum al-ba'a falyatazawwaj. فإنه أغض للبصر وأحسن للفرج ومن لم يستطع فعليه بالصوم فإنه له وجاء." The Prophet ﷺ speaks only the truth. He gives a piece of advice to the youth. He says, "Ya ma'ashar al-shabab, man istata'a minkum al-ba'a falyatazawwaj." Oh youth. This hadith was narrated by a young Sahabi. A young Sahabi, he said, we were with the Prophet ﷺ one day, us as youth, and the Prophet, he dropped a gem on us. He said, "Oh youth, whomsoever is able to get married from you, فَلْيَتَزَوَّجْ." Let him then get married. And then he gave the reasons behind it. And the Prophet ﷺ gave the reasons behind why you should get married. He said, فَإِنَّهُ أَغَضُّ لِلْبَصَرِ. He said, because it helps you lower your gaze. وَأَحْسَنُ لِلْفَرْجِ. And it protects your private parts. Because you have a halal outing now. You have a halal way to release yourself now with your wife. So what does it do? It makes you lower your gaze with ease. And it gives you an easiness to protect your private parts. Then he says, وَمَنْ لَمْ يَسْتَطِعَ. And whomsoever was not able to get married. So he said, whomsoever has ba'a. What is ba'a? It's the ability, it's the qudra al zawaj. It's the ability to be married. So whomsoever of you, O youth, is able to get married. What does able to get married mean? It means that you have the financial ability to provide for your wife and to provide for yourself and to start a family. And it means that you're physically capable of not oppressing your wife. You don't have a sickness that you're going to oppress your woman with, right? So you're able to get married physically and financially. Once you have those two things checked off, you get married and it protects you from haram. You don't sit around and not get married. This doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. If someone is able to get married and he's not getting married, it doesn't make sense. There's something missing in that equation. Because if you're not doing haram, you're dying for halal. if you're not doing haram, if you're not letting something out in a haram way, you're supposed to be dying for halal. If someone is dying to get married, it's a good sign. You know, if your son is dying to get married at 19, it's a good sign. Wallahi, he's a mu'min. Make dua for him and get him married ASAP. We don't follow culture, we follow religion. Yeah, we follow Islam. Yeah, if he's able to get married, you could get him married, and he can't move into with his wife yet, no problem, let him get married. Let him get married and live with you, and they can meet up and do whatever. But let halal be prevalent, you know. Halal is beautiful. Halal is beautiful. Culture doesn't override halal and haram. Culture doesn't override Sharia and Islam. That's why we push to doing haram, because we hold things off. No, you have to get married after medical school. He goes and he gets white hairs and he loses his hair. 12 years he's in medical school, then he gets married after there's nothing left. No, it's un-Islamic. And then he said, whomsoever is not able to get married, yani he doesn't have the nafaqah, he doesn't have the financial means or the physical ability, فَعَلَيْهِ بِالصَّوْمِ فَإِنَّهُ لَهُ وِجَاءٌ. So let him fast. So let that person exert patience through fasting. فَإِنَّهُ لَهُ وِجَاءٌ. And so the fasting will clip his desire. Literally it means it will clip his desire. It will clip your need. And we say, oh, you know, like that's why we said when Sharia comes, when Islam comes, when the Prophet ﷺ comes with a prescription to do something, we take it with a grain of salt, you know. Who fasts? Like who today fasts because they're protecting themselves, you know? I have an intimate story I'll share with you. I have a friend of mine in New Jersey. He's a close friend of mine. He's a pious individual. He loves Allah and His Messenger so much. May Allah bless him and keep him steadfast. May Allah bless this brother. Yeah, it was summertime one time. I'll never forget this. I was like 18 years old and it was summertime and I went to my mosque for Maghrib. Maghrib was at like 8:35 p.m. and it was a hot day. And we prayed Maghrib and then I went to the kitchen to get some tea. There's like tea in the mosque all the time. And I go to the kitchen and I see this friend of mine that was just with us for Maghrib and he was eating a lot. He was really hungry. And he was offering me the food that he had prepared from his house. I'll never forget this. And he was eating corn and all this stuff. And I said, what happened, bro? You hungry? He goes, yeah, I was fasting today. I go, oh. And I looked at the date. I said, why are you fasting? Like it was like a Tuesday or something. I was like, why are you fasting? I said to him, why are you fasting? And he goes, he was shy. He was shy because he's sincere. He's a mu'min. He don't want to disclose his good deeds. You know, the one that fasts for the sake of Allah. Man sama yawman fi sabilillahi ba'ad Allahu. I can't remember the exact wording, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will place 70 years between you and the fire. Whomsoever fasts one single day for the sake of Allah, whomsoever fasts one single day for the sake of Allah with sincerity, Allah, He removes the fire from his face. 70 kharifa, 70 springs, and 70 years. 70 years. One day of fasting is 70 years away from nar. So when you do something with sincerity, it's not like you want people to know, but I kind of caught him, right? And he said, I'm fasting, and he was shy. I said, why? For what? I'm thinking, what happened? And he told me, I'm doing Som Dawood. He said, I'm fasting the fast of Dawood alayhi salam. I don't know if you guys heard, there's a couple of sunnah fasts we have. One of the sunnah fasts we have is the Som of Dawood. Dawood alayhi salam used to fast a day and eat a day, and fast another day and eat a day. He said, I'm doing this. And I go to him, why? He goes, because I work in New York City, and I graduated NGIT last year, and I got a good job, and I can't breathe when I go to New York City. I can't breathe, I'm dying. Why is that? Because he's a realistic individual. He's a human being. He goes to the subway. He said, I'm dying in the subway every day. I go, why? He goes, because I'm not married and I don't have an outlet to release. And I'm dying. My heart is aching. Every day I go and I'm seeing stuff I don't want to see. So he made a resolve to himself. What was his resolve? He said, I'm going to fast. Why is that? Because he's a mu'min. He has iman. And he hears the hadith of the Prophet and he implements. He hears the words of the Prophet and he implements because he's a mu'min and he has iman. He did this for 3 years, by the way. He did the Som Dawood for 3 years straight. He never missed a day. 3 years straight, he was fasting a day and breaking off a day. What happened when he did this, by the way? This is a side note. This is a tangent. What happened when he did this? I know this personally because I was intimate with his brother and I knew him daily. He was memorizing Quran at the same time. His memorization of the Quran became strong and quicker. He memorized a lot at that time period. Not only that, he was doing something called praying Qiyam al-Layl consistently. He was praying Qiyam al-Layl consistently. He was praying the night prayer, Qiyam al-Layl consistently. With the Quran he was memorizing. And I want to say something. Why am I mentioning this? Like, why am I mentioning these things that came off of his fast? That's because if you do something for the sake of Allah with sincerity, Allah, He opens up on you differently. He opens up on you differently. He opens up on you and grants you facilitation to do good and stay away from haram differently. It's not easy to wake up for Qiyam al-Layl. It's not easy to wake up for Qiyam al-Layl, and it's not easy to memorize the Quran with consistency as you work a full-time job in New York and you come back to New Jersey. It's exhausting. But wallahi, Allah placed barakah in his time. Allah placed blessings in his time. Why did Allah place blessings and barakah in this individual's time? Because he was true with Allah and he was fasting for the sake of Allah. And Allah, He says, the Prophet, he says in the hadith, "Man taraka shay'an lillahi ta'ala, awadahu Allahu khayran minha." This hadith is so beautiful. He says, whomsoever leaves something off for the sake of Allah, with sincerity, Allah, He'll grant him something better than that thing. Whomsoever leaves something off for the sake of Allah with sincerity, He'll grant him something better than that thing. What's he leaving off? He's leaving off his desires, eating and drinking. He's fasting for the sake of Allah. Fasting is leaving something off as well. When you fast, you're leaving off desires, leaving off food and drink. What did Allah grant him better than that thing? What did Allah grant him better than the food that he was missing out on? What did Allah grant him better? He granted him a connection with Him. He granted him the ability to memorize His book. He granted him the ability to stand at night, qiyam al-layl, and pray qiyam al-layl. What's the bottom line of the story? This man took the prescription of the Prophet and he fasted so he could kill his shahwa and kill his desire, so he doesn't fall into haram. He got married. After doing this for 3 years, he got married to a pious girl. And wallahi, I was speaking to him like 2 years after he got married. And this is something he was telling me intimately. He goes, Ismail, wallahi, I don't know what I did. I don't know what I did to deserve this woman. I don't know, I'm scared. I'm scared of the bounty of Allah upon me. I'm scared. He's like, I sleep at night and I wake up and I'm scared. I get goosebumps. Like, what did I do to deserve this girl? Wallahi, he was telling me, what did I do to deserve this girl? Allah blessed me with such a good woman. Allah blessed me with such a good woman. She's so pious and obedient and she loves me, you know? And she now he has kids with her. And I told him, I know why you got this. I told him, I know why. Like maybe maybe you don't know why, but I know why. I said, it's because you're a mu'min and you love Allah. And you left something off for the sake of Allah. And Allah, فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُضِيعُ أَجْرَ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. Allah doesn't let the good actions of the good person go to waste. Allah doesn't let the good actions of the muhsin go to waste. Allah, He says this as a promise in the Quran. Allah doesn't let the goodness that you do go to waste. It doesn't go to waste. Allah, He sees everything. Allah, He gives you back a reward. Allah, He grants you a reward for what you did. The patience you endured and the endurance and the forbearance, Allah, there's victory after the difficulty. There's an opening after the closing. Inna ma'al usri yusra. Yeah, with difficulty comes ease. Yeah, with difficulty comes ease. وَمَنْ يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا وَيَرْزُقُهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبُ وَمَنْ يَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ فَهُوَ حَسْبُهُ إِنَّ اللَّهَ بَالِغُ أَمْرِهِ. Whomsoever relies upon Allah, whomsoever has fear of Allah, وَمَنْ يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ, whomsoever has taqwa of Allah, يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا. He opens up on him and He opens a door for him. He opens up on this person. You have taqwa, your end goal is victory. وَيَرْزُقُهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبُ. And He's going to grant you sustenance from where you would not have imagined and ever thought of. He would grant you rizq and sustenance and provision from where you would have never ever imagined and thought of. وَمَنْ يَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ فَهُوَ حَسْبُهُ. And whomsoever relies upon Allah, Allah is sufficient for him. Allah is sufficient for him. إِنَّ اللَّهَ بَالِغُ أَمْرِهِ. Indeed, Allah is all aware and all in control over everything. Allah is in all control over every situation in the world. Allah is the King of Kings. He's in control of the situation you're in. You make dua to Allah with tadarruh, with humility. You call out to Allah in the middle of the night and you talk to Allah like you're speaking to a human. You speak to Allah and you say, Allah, I'm going through difficulty. Ya Allah, leave me in my difficulty. Allah is not going to leave you. He doesn't let the good doing of a good person go to waste. I told him this is why you were gifted with your wife, because you were sincere and you wanted halal. The Prophet, he says in Bukhari, وَمَنْ يَسْتَعْفِثْ يَعِفَّهُ اللَّهُ. Whomsoever wants iffah, whomsoever fights and he wants iffah, he wants to be pure. يَعِفَّهُ اللَّهُ. Allah, He grants him purity and chastity. Whomsoever wants chastity, Allah grants him chastity. You have to want it. You have to want it. You have to want halal more than haram. You have to have halal beloved in your heart more than haram. Yeah? You have to love Allah more than the filth of a sin. Your love for Allah has to be stronger than the filth of a sin. Looking at what you should not look at is filthy. It's a sin. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us contentment with what we have. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us the ability to lower our gaze and to protect our gazes and to cover our faults. وأقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. أوصي نفسي وإياكم بتقوى الله تعالى. Brothers and sisters, I remind myself and all of you to fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to be conscious of Allah, to be aware of Allah, to remind yourself every day Allah is watching you. When you close the door and you go into your room and you close your light and you're scared of your mom and dad hearing you, Allah, He hears you and He sees you. يَعْلَمُ خَائِنَةُ الْأَعْيُنِ وَمَا تُخْفِي الصُّدُورِ. Allah knows the fabrication of the eye and what the chest conceals. Allah, He has to tell you this to remind you that He knows everything. وَمَا تَسْقَطُ مِنْ وَرَقَةٍ إِلَّا يَعْلَمُهَا وَيَعْلَمُ مَا فِي الْبَرِّ وَالْبَحْرِ. Allah, He knows every single leaf that falls. Every leaf that falls on the face of the universe, Allah is aware of it, and He knows what's on land and what's in the sea. And Allah is aware of what's on land and what's in the sea. Why does Allah say this? Because the depths of the ocean, the human being can't even reach the depths of the ocean. And there's living organisms in the depths of the ocean. There's living organisms in the depths of the ocean where a submarine can't even go. It will explode due to pressure. وَيَعْلَمُ مَا فِي الْبَرِّ وَالْبَحْرِ. Allah knows everything on land and everything in the depths of the ocean. And He knows every single leaf that falls. يَعْلَمُ خَائِنَةُ الْأَعْيُنِ وَمَا تُخْفِي الصُّدُورِ. And He knows the fable of the eye, the fabrication of the eye and what the chest conceals. So when you close the light and you think you're hiding from people, يستخفون من الناس ولا يستخفون من الله وهو معهم إذ يبيتون ما لا يرضى من القول وكان الله بما يعملون محيطا. Allah, He says in Surah An-Nisa, they fear people, يستخفون من الناس ولا يستخفون من Allah, and they don't fear Allah. وهو معهم إذ يبيتون ما لا يرضى من القول, and Allah is with them. Allah is always with them and aware of everything they're saying when they're saying wrong things. And Allah was all aware of everything they did. وَكَانَ اللَّهُ بِمَا يَعْمَلُونَ مُحِيطًا. Allah is all aware, He's all encompassing of everything they do. What is the fabrication of the eye that Allah speaks about in Surah Al-Ghafir? يَعْلَمُ خَائِنَةُ الْأَعْيُنِ وَمَا تُخْفِي الصُّدُورِ. What is the fabrication of the eye? They say it's when you're speaking to someone and you see a good-looking woman. As you're speaking to this person, you think you're slick and you think you're smart. So you do this. Yeah, you're talking to him and you do this. You're getting a good look at something you should not look at. Allah, He tells you that I know that look and I see that look and I am aware of that look. And I'm aware of what your chest conceals as well. And I'm aware of what your heart, inside your heart, conceals as well. Not only do I know the fabrication of the eye, I also know what's in your heart. Yeah, and we said that, what are productive ways in order for me to make myself lower my gaze? First and foremost, you're aware that Allah is watching you, and Allah, you're going to be asked about everything you did in this dunya and the next. إن السمع والبصر والفؤاد كل أولئك كان عنه مسؤولا. Allah, He says in Surah An-Nisa, إن السمع والبصر والفؤاد. Indeed, the hearing that you did with your ears, والبصر, and the looking that you did with your eyes, والفؤاد, in your heart, كل أولئك كان عنه مسؤولا. All of those things you're going to be asked about one day. All of those things you're going to be asked about one day. All of those things. And Allah, He links the hearing of the ear and the seeing of the eye with the heart, because there's a direct correlation with the hearing and the seeing with the heart. When you hear something haram, it destroys the heart. When you listen to garbage music, it destroys the heart. When you listen to bad words and cursing, it destroys the heart. When you look at something haram, it destroys the heart. It's a sin. What's another productive way to make myself stop looking at haram? You understand that it's an obligation. We mentioned this a lot in the beginning of the khutbah. It's an obligation. Allah commands us to lower our gaze. Understand what an obligation is. If you don't do it, it's a grave sin. Another way is that you understand that the angels are writing everything that you do. كِرَامًا كَاتِبِينَ يَعْلَمُونَ مَا تَفْعَلُونَ. Allah, He describes noble angels. They are there following you, writing everything you do. They are aware of everything you do. And be serious about lowering your gaze. And whomsoever is serious about lowering his gaze, Allah, He'll grant him the protection and the ability to do so. And we said this, وَمَنْ يَسْتَعْفِفْ يَعِفُّهُ اللَّهُ. Whomsoever seeks iffah, and he seeks purity, and he seeks to be chaste, Allah grants him chastity. Allah grants you this. You have to want it. You have to want it. If you truly want it, Allah will give it to you. And one of the three eyes that is mentioned that will be protected from the fire, and the fire will not touch. ثلاثة لا ترى أعينهم النار. Three eyes that will never be touched by the fire ever. The one that was guarding for the sake of Allah. You know, you're out in jihad and you're staying up all night with your eye open looking for the enemy. And the second one is the eye that cried from the love of Allah. بكت من خشية الله. The eye that cried due to the khashya of Allah, due to the love of Allah, will never touch the fire. And the third one is the eye that وعين كفت عن محارم الله. The eye that stopped itself from looking at what Allah has prohibited to look at. كفت عن محارم الله. It stopped from looking at the haram that it shouldn't have been looking at. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us ease in facilitation to not look at haram. We ask Allah to cover our faults. We ask Allah to make our love for Him more than the love of the filth of a sin. We ask Allah to make our love for Him more than the love of a sin. We ask Allah to make us love fasting and salah and zakah more than any haram. True happiness and true contentment and true tranquility is in acts of worship. It's not in haram. It's not in alcohol. It's not in gambling. It's not in fornication. It's not in clubbing. Clubbing, gambling, fornication, haram, anything haram, interest is all misery and sadness. It's not happiness. It's not happiness. Happiness is salah and wudu. Happiness is coming out of the wudu khana and making salah. Happiness is praying, and happiness is fasting, and happiness is zakah, and happiness is not looking at haram. You receive a coolness in your heart when you do ghadd al-basar. If you're not receiving a coolness in your heart, it's because your heart is decaying and diseased. You have to continuously do it. Someone comes and says, Shaykh, I don't feel khushu' in my salah. How are you going to have khushu' when you're looking at haram all night on the internet? How are you going to have khushu'? How are you going to have khushu'? Fear Allah more than you fear people. Fear Allah more than you fear your parents. Allah is more befitting and has a right more over you than your parents to be feared. We ask Allah to protect us and to cover our faults and sins. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us tawbah before we pass away. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us the ability to stay away from haram always. We ask Allah to grant us a close connection with Him. ربنا ظلمنا أنفسنا وإن لم تغفر لنا وترحمنا لنكونن من الخاسرين ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار اللهم اغفر للمسلمين والمسلمات والمؤمنين والمؤمنات الأحياء منهم والأموات إنك سميع قريب مجيب الدعوات إن الله تعالى يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون فاذكروا الله يذكركم واشكروه يزدكم واستغفروه يغفر لكم وأقم الصلاة إن الصلاة تنهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر ولذكر الله أكبر والله يعلم ما تصنعون